Hello everyone! This is a video called The Gender Cake, and if you haven't seen the Gender Cake overview, which just gives you a summary of what each of the tiers mean, please check that out. Why? Because that is the video where I go over everything on that's trippy, the left-hand side of this chart, because I'm not doing that right now, okay? So the physical only, the physical plus biobehavioral, the emotional plus socio-behavioral, the emotional only, and the compatibility filter. I did a summary of what those mean on the last video, which is called the Gender Cake Overview. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. If you have already checked that out, today we're going to be discussing the very first tier of the cake in depth, and that tier is called biological sex. Now, it's important to note that this tier has nothing to do with choices, with behaviors, with emotions. It is purely physical, and in this case, what that means is it has to do with the gametes. Okay, so what you're used to hearing in conversations about biological sex probably includes chromosomes, right? When people are talking about, well, how do we tell if someone is a male or a female? You are probably used to someone bringing up the concept of XX and XY, yada yada, blah blah blah, okay? Well, that's not what we're going to be talking about today, okay? The conversation today has absolutely nothing to do with chromosomes. So what we're going to do is put them on a shelf. We're going to put chromosomes on a shelf. We're going to put them away because we don't need them for this conversation. Okay, so please don't get in my comments and be like, but what about the chromosomes? The chromosomes are very important, but not for today's conversation. That's not how you figure out what a person's biological sex is. We are a sexually dimorphic species. We have two sets of gametes, ovum and sperm. And that's what we're going to talk about today, okay? So, this is a cute little picture that I found of sperm and egg. And so what I would like for you, audience, to do is, and I know this is going to be tricky because you're so used to the conversation being completely different, but hear me out. What I would like for you to do is think about all of the possible combinations of sperm and egg in the human body. Why? Because there are two gametes, which means there are two biological sexes. And people who say there are more than two are not using gametes to determine that, they're using chromosomes. But like I have already said multiple times, chromosomes are not part of today's conversation, okay? So when you think about biological sex and whether or not a person is a male, whether or not a person is a female, you are thinking about this little chart here, okay? A, B, C, or D. This encompasses every single possible way a person could exist on this planet. There are no humans that do not fit into one of these four categories. In fact, I could not find any humans that fit into category C, but we're going to get to that in a minute. So what are they? Category A, and this is just the first thing I thought of, okay? This is not a commentary on who's better, males or females. Males and females have inherent equal human value, okay? So A is sperm, which means body makes sperm. B, body makes ovum or eggs. C, body makes both sperm and ovum. Or D, body makes sperm, or D, body makes neither sperm nor ovum, okay? Those are the four categories that every single human being on planet Earth fits into. There is no third biological sex. There is no opting out of biological sex from a biological standpoint. There is a different tier of the cake where we talk about opting out of whatever it is, whatever your biology says, but that is not what we're talking about for this tier, okay? At the end, we're going to put all the information together and tie it up in a neat little bow. Or rather, pipe some icing onto it, whatever. Okay, moving on. So, right now though, we're talking about biological sex, which has to do with gametes only and nothing to do with emotions. All right, there's a place for emotions. It's not this first tier. That being said, there are four potentialities that come from acknowledging the chart I just showed you, okay? Number one, female with a properly functioning reproductive system. Number 2, female with an improperly functioning reproductive system. 3, male with a properly functioning reproductive system. 4, male with an improperly functioning reproductive system. Before you allow yourself to get triggered by these statements, please keep in mind that a lot of society has bought into the idea that just because someone's body is not functioning properly in some way, shape, form, or fashion, that must mean that they are inferior. That must mean that their inherent human value is less. And that is not my argument at all. Not even a little bit, okay? People who are infertile, people whose reproductive systems do not work properly, have just as much human value from an inherent standpoint as anybody else, okay? However, this particular tier of the cake is about biology only. There are no emotions involved in this tier. Remember though, it's a cake, it's one whole cake. You're not just taking the bottom tier of the cake and ignoring the rest of it, right? All the tiers of the cake are important. So please keep that in mind as we continue through this video. But when we get to the end, when we get to video number 6 and we talk about the very tippy top and we do a little summary, at that moment it will become very apparent why each of these tiers is important in its own right and should be respected in its own right, or at least I hope so. But please don't be offended by this. This is just a biological reality. I have heard a lot of people say that they are a third biological sex, but the thing is, in order for there to be a third biological sex, we would have to have 3 gametes as a species, but we only have 2. We have ovum and sperm, and those are the gametes that come together to make more humans, which is what biological sex is. You know, it's about your reproductive system and the function of it. So that's where I came up with these 4 situations. One more reminder, if your body is in the D category, it probably means you're infertile. The only other, I'm saying probably because there is one other situation, and the other situation is that you were born neuter, but I can't find a single situation or a single case study in which that is the scenario. If you can find a verifiable source stating that a person was born completely neuter, which means no reproductive system whatsoever, not one that doesn't function, but I mean none at all, no reproductive system, no sexual characteristics, none of that, please let me know, because how have I been looking into this for like a decade? I've been researching these things for a decade and I have not found any such thing. So if you have found that, wow, that's awesome. Please let me know and I'll make a follow-up video about it. But as of right now, these are the 4 situations, okay? You can be a male or a female. And yes, you can call yourself whatever you want and I will fully support your right to do that. But again, there's a specific tier for that, and that tier is just as valid as this one. That's just not the tier we're talking about right now, okay? So, for biological sex, you're going to figure out which one you are, and if you do not know, please consult a doctor. And that's not me being facetious and annoying. I'm being very genuine when I say that. I don't know you. I don't know what you would classify yourself as based on your own biology. So if you don't know, then that is a conversation with medical professionals, okay? Ovum, sperm, both, or neither. Which one? All right, so here is how it all shakes out. If your body makes ovum, if you instinctively were like, oh, I'm a letter A, that means you're female. If your body makes sperm, you're a male. If your body makes both, if your body literally makes both egg and sperm, and you can produce healthy offspring, then that is the only situation in which I would consider, based on the science, not me just choosing based on my feelings, okay, based on the medical science. If your body can make healthy offspring from both the sperm and the egg that your body produces, that is a situation in which I would say, okay, valid to call yourself both male and female, accurate. Otherwise, if your body makes neither, the question then becomes, well, if your reproductive system were functioning properly, would you be in category A or category B? And then once you've answered that question, then you'll know. Again, this is a question for a medical professional, not me, not my comment section, I don't know, okay? But with even the unique situations, even with, and I know a lot of people are going to say, well, what about the intersex conditions, you know? And I have thought about this for a long time. I have been looking into this for about a decade. So please rest assured, I did not forget about these people who are just as valid as everybody else, by the way, who have these conditions. They're just as important, just as special, just as human, and they still fit into this category, okay? And I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of people will say that they are a third, a fourth, a fifth, etc. biological sex, or opt out of biological sex because they don't fit the norm. And they don't fit the norm because their reproductive systems are not functioning properly. But here's the thing, that doesn't negate a human's value. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have bought into the idea that it does. Oh, well, you're not like us, so you must be the other. And I don't think that makes logical sense from a medical standpoint. Because you can be a female with a reproductive system that just simply does not function properly. You can be a male with a reproductive system that doesn't function properly and be just as valuable as the people in the other two groups. So, A, B, C, or D. That's what we're choosing from. And by choosing, I mean figuring out based on our biology that we may need to consult a doctor to help figure out. Okay? So, that is more or less the end of the very first video on biological sex. And I want to remind you that this is purely physical. We will be going into the opt-out conversation and how that's totally valid in other tiers of this cake. But this particular cake is just about biological sex, okay? And the next thing that we're going to be discussing is biogender. And you might be wondering, why would you put the prefix bio in the front of gender? Why wouldn't you just call it gender? And that's a really good question that we're going to answer. Oh, why do I keep feeling like I have several of these presentations and they're all very similar. I think I forgot one of the slides. So I might be mentioning this again, but before I get off here, I want to make it very clear that the prefix bio is relevant for both of those tiers, both of the bottom tiers, because these are the tiers that you would be conversing with your medical professionals about, okay? There are 3 situations in which you would be disclosing this information. And those situations are conversations with medical staff, as well as scientific studies and surveys, and then finally conversations with intimate partners. And that's it. That's it. So I know it can be triggering to think about these 2 tiers as relevant when you've opted out of identifying in the way that everyone expects that you should. And I totally have space and empathy for that. But that conversation, although valid, is for a different tier of the cake. And I keep saying that because I know this conversation is very offensive to people. I have had an entire TikTok account deleted forever because so many people reported my videos for hate speech all at once. A popular influencer saw one of my videos and it went viral. Because they made a video about it. So their whole audience saw my content. And instead of actually watching the content for the nuance and making an effort to understand what I was saying, they were like, you hate trans people! and reported my content for hate speech. And so my entire account got deleted and I was this close to 10,000 followers. So I'm making multiple disclaimers now that I'm discussing this long form, which, to be fair, it's a whole lot easier to have nuance when you are in a long form discussion on YouTube rather than when you're making little sound bites, I guess, because honestly, even a 5, 6, 7 minute video really is like a sound bite on that app. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, talking about these things that aren't even YouTube related. This video is pretty much over, but the next one is going to be about biogender, what that means, why the prefix is so important, why biogender is just as important as gender identity, and why we can't just get rid of one simply because we want to. And all that conversation is going to be happening in the next video, which is going to be called The Gender Cake Biogender. And I look forward to seeing you all there. So please interact with the video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.